Now, if you spent more than 5 minutes online reading or watching Dungeons & Dragons content, then you know 5e is too easy. Yeah, that's right. Challenge rating does not work. Oh my gosh, it's only made for heroic characters and superhero-like characters. The DM can't make a challenging game out of 5th edition. Yeah, that's right, and death saves. Death saves ruin everything.
Oh yeah, that's definitely
Dungeons and
true.
Dragons 5th edition is just way too easy. If you want to play something really tough, you've got to find a different game.
Yeah, that's true.
Ah, get out of here. Go, move. Go on. Ah, trolls. All right, so I was having a little fun there playing around with my NPC voices. Of course, I don't think people online are overreacting to stuff. Of course not. The reality is, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is not a perfect game, but you know what? There are no perfect games out there. In fact, my last video, I talked about a lot of different versions of D&D and compared them to different alcohols. But my point in that video is that there are so many different ways to play this game, and none of them are wrong. So if you like 5th edition and you don't want to listen to all that criticism, and you want to make a good, interesting game for your players, I'm here to help. I'm going to give you 5 things that will improve your game. And these are not tips. These are not my opinions. These are 5 things that are actually in the rules. They're actually in the books that you can use to improve your 5th edition games. Now, it's almost like the designers maybe knew what they were doing when they were making the game. At least before everybody started tinkering with the game with their own homebrew. No, whoa, don't attack. I'm not against homebrew. I have a whole video where I go over the homebrew rules that I use. But you need to be aware of the actual game rules before you start uploading a lot of homebrew into your games. So here are 5 Dungeons & Dragons rules that people don't actually get right. So first of all, realize character building has set rules to it. Rolling 46 for stats is an optional rule. Using feats is an optional rule, and multiclassing is an optional rule. If you use all 3 of those options, not to mention giving your characters an additional feat at first level, then your player characters are going to be more powerful, and they are going to throw off the balance of your game. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't use those 3 options. I am saying if you are using those 3 options, then you have to account for that, and you have to make your game more challenging. You have to make your encounters more difficult because your player characters are going to be more powerful. Number 2 on our list is dark vision. Now, you need to understand that dark vision does not make characters see as if it's normal light. Dark vision lets you see in darkness as if it is dim light. The actual rule says that dim light counts as lightly obscured area, and lightly obscured areas give disadvantage on wisdom perception checks that rely on sight. So whenever player characters are using only their dark vision to see in the dark, they're going to have disadvantage to spot traps, they're going to have disadvantage to spot hidden creatures, and almost every time I've told players this rule, they immediately light a torch. So the next time your players are only depending on dark vision, tell them about that rule. Everything we've covered so far is a hard, fast rule. However, this next one is more of a guideline. But aren't they all guidelines? In the Dungeon Master's Guide, it recommends only 1 long rest per 24-hour period and 2 short rests per long rest. Now, I use this in my games, and I find it very effective at limiting players from constantly refreshing all of their abilities. Even the softest interpretation of those optional rules would say you could get 2 short rests, then have to take a long rest in order to get 2 more short rests. And that's the max you could get in a 24-hour period. And if you stick to that, that makes the adventuring day a lot easier to manage. Now, while we're talking about the adventuring day, remember, if your players take a long rest at like noon in the middle of the day, they're going to burn most of their daylight. So by the time they finish that long rest, it's going to be getting dark. And things are always more dangerous when it's dark out. That's the other thing as a DM. Remember the context of your adventuring day, because the monsters should know what they're doing and adjust accordingly. See our previous point about dark vision. Now, as always, you can help out the channel by hitting the like and subscribe button and clicking the notification bell to make sure that you get to see all my latest videos. You can also check out the Wandering Tavern, which is a sponsor of this video. In fact, April is Wandering Tavern month in the Dire Den. It's clearly inspired by Studio Ghibli, filled with fantastic arcana punk flying ships and mysterious dark spirits that contrast the whimsy of this flight and fantasy setting. This expands on the successful Kickstarter they had last year called Sky Zephyrs. It not only includes the setting history, but battle maps, NPCs, plot hooks, magic items, and even setting-themed recipes. Explore this immense flying city with all its battle maps and details. Every nook and cranny delve deep into the devious underbelly of the tavern while getting to know its wide range of unique NPCs, patrons, and staff. The Wandering Tavern's dark mysteries and entangled truths are yours to unlock. Use the link in the description and the pinned comment below, so when you back this Kickstarter, you'll also support the Dire Den. Now let's talk about the biggest bugaboo of them all, challenge rating. First, it's very important to understand that a D20 system is extremely swingy. When I say swingy, I mean there's a wide range of numbers between 1 and 20, much more than a D6, for example. This is why strategy games like Warhammer 40,000 are based on a D6 system. There's very few D20 based strategy games out there that are designed for competitive play. For example, Marvel Crisis Protocol and Star Wars Legion use a specialized D8 system, which tightens their math even more. So, when we're talking about a D20 system, the math is not going to be as predictable. And that's, like I said, why they don't use D20 systems in highly competitive tabletop strategy games. In fact, the only example I can think of that's still competitive, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Frostgrave. But Frostgrave is known as more of a beer and pretzels game, not a hardcore competitive game. But the only one I do know of that is highly competitive is Infinity, and it has one of the most complex rule systems of any tabletop strategy game in existence. Hi there, Editor Brad here. I decided to remove 2 minutes of unnecessary footage, which was me ranting about problematic players. At the time of recording, I thought it was funny. I don't know. But anyway, the point is, it's a feature, not a bug. The swinginess of the D20 is intended to make the game unpredictable and exciting, and that's just the nature of Dungeons & Dragons. Therefore, it's important to remember that you can run the same encounter multiple times with the same player characters and the same monsters, and you could get widely different outcomes. You could get a very easy encounter where the party rolls really well and wipes the floor with the monsters, and you could get an almost total party kill. That's just the nature of the D20. But let's take a look at the actual challenge rating mechanics. Now, most of the time, what people will tell you is that you should be able to compare the challenge rating of the monster to the level of the party. So a challenge rating 4 monster should be a fair challenge for 4 fourth level player characters. And that's a good kind of guideline, but that's not the actual rules. If you go to the Dungeon Master's Guide and look at the rules themselves, there's an experience point budget. So hold on tight because it's a little complicated. This is how the budget actually works. There's an experience point threshold table in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and you use that table to determine the experience point threshold for each character in the party. Then you use the character's level and their XP threshold and repeat this process for every character. For example, if you have a party of 3 third-level characters and 1 second-level character, the party's total XP threshold would be 225 points for each of the third-level characters and 150 points for the second-level character. Therefore, the total party experience threshold would be 825. Then you take those 825 points and spin that on the number of monsters you can put in your encounter. Now, I know that's complicated, but that's the actual rule, and it is more accurate than using that general guideline of simply comparing the challenge rating to the player character level. But here's the good news. You don't have to remember any of that. All you have to remember is Kobold Fight Club. It's a good resource. It's a great website that does all the math for you. So just remember Kobold Fight Club, and you use it consistently until you really start to understand challenge rating. It's not as broken as everybody says it is. If you actually do the math and use it as it's described in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Ultimately, challenge rating just gets you in the ballpark. It's up to you as the Dungeon Master to run the encounter as you see fit. And you're intelligent and insightful. This is not a video game. You are not pre-programmed software that has to stick to this formula. You can adjust it as you wish. And we're going to look at how to do that when we talk about our last rule, and that's the adventuring day. Now, the Dungeon Master's Guide represents 6 to 8 encounters per adventuring day. And when I first saw that in the Dungeon Master's Guide, I thought, man, that's a lot. There's no way I've ever done 6 to 8 encounters in an adventuring day. But then it dawned on me, I use waves of monsters. And if you think of waves of monsters as each wave counts as an encounter, then yeah, I easily do 6 encounters in an adventuring day, and 8 is not that unrealistic for me. So let's take that example of the bugbear and 2 hobgoblins. They attack, and then while they are fighting the players, 5 goblins arrive on the scene and add to the encounter. Then at the end, 1 more bugbear shows up. So that's 3 waves of monsters. That's 3 encounters that you have stacked on top of each other. And what you can do with those waves of monsters is you can decide as the DM, again, you can fine tune it in the middle of the combat, how quickly the next wave arrives. Or if the players are doing really badly, that 3rd wave doesn't need to show up at all. So this is a way you can tune your difficulty by using waves of monsters. And this is extremely helpful, and it is a way to get multiple encounters into an adventuring day when it only feels like 1 encounter. So it feels like 1 big encounter, but technically, math-wise, it's 3 encounters rolled into 1. That was just a quick example, and I have a much more detailed example that I wanted to share, but this video is already long enough as it is, so you're going to get a bonus video this month where I give you a detailed way to do waves of encounters, and I'm going to include a dungeon as an example. So you'll get my tips on running waves of monsters, and a dungeon map, and a list of encounters that you can use in your game. So you're going to get a bonus video this month, so make sure you subscribe and come back in the next few days for that bonus video. Let's go over the 5 rules that actually make 5th edition as challenging as it should be. Number 1, character creation. Remember, how you build your characters will have a significant impact on the difficulty of the game itself. Number 2, dark vision. Remember the rules for dark vision. Number 3, remember the rules for long and short rests. 2 short rests per long rest, only 1 long rest per adventuring day. Number 4, remember challenge rating is more complicated than people think it actually is. So use Kobold Fight Club to get it as accurate as you can. Number 5, use waves of monsters so that your adventuring day actually gets close to that 6 to 8 encounters per day. Ultimately, my point is you need to know the rules before you break the rules, and you can't complain about 5e being broken if you're the one who broke it. If you change things on the player side of the game, you have to change things on the DM side of the game to match. Thanks again for visiting the Dire Den, and I'll see you next time.